This
20
trajectory
top
is
executives couldn't
unsustainable,
do it.
gentlemen. We must
Then a
pivot
wine
now.
waitress
Pivot
saved the
based on
Mafia
what,
boss
exactly?
200
This
million.
data is already outdated.
Towering above it all was the domain of Don Valerio, a man whose name alone could bend fear and respect into a single, unyielding force. Inside the walls of his empire, fortunes were made, alliances forged, and lives risked with casual precision. But now the empire was trembling. $200 million hung in the balance, a sum that could make or break the syndicate Valerio had spent years building. 20 of his most trusted executives had tried to secure it, each failure leaving scars in their wake. Deals that should have been simple collapsed under the weight of misjudgments, miscommunications, or betrayal. And each failure had drawn Valerio's gaze sharper, his temper more unpredictable. Tonight, the grand hall of his headquarters was quieter than usual. Guards moved like shadows along the edges of the room, their presence a constant reminder of the dangers lurking outside. Valerio stood by the window, looking down at the city as if he could command it to obey him simply by desire. His dark eyes, usually unreadable, held the tension of a storm brewing. "You think anyone can fix this?" he muttered to himself, almost a whisper. His assistant, a tall man with a lined face, shifted nervously. "Don, I'm afraid the executives have done everything they can." Perhaps, he paused, unsure of how to finish. The truth was harsh. There was no one left who could solve this. And then, among the muted clinking of glasses and soft footsteps, there was Isla. She moved with quiet confidence, balancing a tray of wine glasses, her eyes scanning the room as if every detail mattered. To most, she was just a waitress, part of the background of luxury and power. But Valerio noticed something different in her. Calm, attentive, intelligent. A subtle awareness that made the chaos of the room seem almost like a stage for her observations. He did not call for her, but somehow she found herself near him. Perhaps it was instinct. Perhaps the city itself guided her to this moment. "You seem out of place," Valerio said finally, his voice smooth but edged with curiosity. Isla tilted her head slightly, holding a glass of deep red wine. "Out of place," she repeated softly. "I suppose that depends on perspective." Valerio's eyes narrowed. Most people would have trembled, avoided eye contact, or rushed through their duties. She did neither. Instead, she observed him as if she could see not just the man but the empire he held so carefully in his grasp. "You are quiet," he said. "Do you listen better than others, or do you simply notice what others do not?" A small smile brushed her lips, almost imperceptible. "Perhaps a little of both," she said. "Sometimes, watching the chaos tells you more than speaking ever could." Valerio considered her words. For the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of hope. Not many could grasp the complexity of the situation with such clarity, let alone do so unnoticed. The executives had tried meetings, long calculations, calls across the city and beyond. They had presented their reports, detailed plans, and persuasive arguments, and yet all had failed. Each failure had chipped away at the empire, leaving Valerio with fewer options and fewer people he could trust. Isla, however, did not speak of reports or numbers. She spoke in observations, patterns, and intuitions. She noticed the hesitations of the executives, the cracks in their reasoning, the alliances that were not as solid as they seemed. In her quiet, careful way, she understood the invisible threads connecting everyone in the room, and more importantly, she knew where those threads might snap. "Why are you telling me this?" Valerio asked, a hint of challenge in his voice. Isla hesitated. Her voice was steady, but there was weight in her words. "Because if someone does not act soon, everything will collapse, and it is not the money I fear, it is the lives that depend on it." For a moment, Valerio was silent. It was rare for anyone to speak of lives in his world without fear or hesitation. Most people were concerned with survival, loyalty, or greed. She spoke of lives as if they mattered beyond their usefulness. The room seemed to grow colder, the city lights casting long shadows against the walls. Valerio finally spoke, almost a whisper. "Do you know how many have tried and failed?" "I have been watching," Isla said calmly. "I know what has been done and I see why it has not worked. But I also see a way forward." Valerio's dark eyes studied her face, searching for deception. He found none. Instead, he found confidence tempered with intelligence. He found a mind sharp enough to cut through the chaos that had defeated the finest strategists he had employed. "Step closer," he said finally, and she obeyed. "Tell me what you see." For the next hour, Isla moved through his plans, tracing connections and highlighting weaknesses. She spoke of alliances that were fragile, decisions that were based on pride rather than logic, and opportunities the executives had overlooked. Every word was precise, yet fluid, like a dance of strategy and insight. Valerio listened, initially skeptical, then intrigued, and finally hopeful. "This is dangerous," he said, almost to himself. "No one else has dared to point out the flaws so clearly." "I am not concerned with danger," Isla said softly. "I am concerned with the outcome. If it succeeds, many will be saved. If it fails, many will be lost. That is the truth that matters." There was a long silence. Outside, the city hummed with indifferent energy. Inside, Valerio considered what he had just heard. He realized that the solution he had sought for months was not hidden in calculations, reports, or meetings. It was hidden in observation, understanding, and courage. And it had come from someone he would never have expected. "You will help me?" he asked finally. "I can," she replied, "but only if you trust me." Valerio's lips curved in a small, rare smile. Trust was not easily given in his world, especially not to someone outside the circle of power. But in that moment he sensed that Isla was different. She had something that could not be taught: insight, courage, and a quiet strength that commanded respect. "Then you will be my partner," he said, his voice low but firm. "Not as a subordinate, but as someone who matters. Understand this: if you fail, it will not just be the money we lose. It will be far worse." Isla nodded, her calm demeanor unwavering. "I understand." The first step had been taken. In the shadows of the empire, an unlikely alliance was formed, and the seeds of a plan began to grow. But the world outside was not idle. Rival factions were watching, waiting for the slightest misstep, eager to seize what Valerio had built. And among those who had sworn loyalty, some hearts were already turning. That night, Valerio could not sleep. He stared at the city below, thinking of Isla and the audacity she had shown. He realized that the next hours would test everything: his empire, his mind, and perhaps his heart. And somewhere, hidden in the quiet of the Grand Hall, Isla plotted the first move that would either save the 200 million or destroy everything in a single, irreversible sweep. Outside, the city lights flickered as if in anticipation. A storm was coming, not of rain, but of power, ambition, and courage. And in the eye of that storm, a wine waitress and a mafia boss had begun a journey that would change the fate of an empire. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Valerio's office, painting the room in soft gold. The city below was still waking, oblivious to the storm brewing inside the empire above. Don Valerio, normally sharp and unyielding at all hours, had spent the night awake. His mind ran through the implications of the message he had received. A trusted executive had betrayed him. The betrayal cut deeper than any threat from a rival. It was a poison from within. And yet, he was not alone. Isla had arrived earlier than usual, her calm presence a stark contrast to the tension that clung to the room. She moved with quiet precision, carrying a notebook filled with careful observations, calculations, and ideas. To most, she would appear small and unassuming, yet her eyes held an intensity that spoke of intelligence far beyond her position. "You are early," Valerio remarked, his voice a mixture of curiosity and caution. "I like to prepare," she replied simply, "especially when the stakes are higher than anyone can imagine." Valerio studied her for a moment. noting the determination in her posture, the subtle confidence that did not seek approval but demanded respect through competence. There was something almost mythic about the way she carried herself, an ordinary figure in extraordinary circumstances. He gestured for her to sit. "Tell me what you know about this betrayal." Isla flipped open her notebook, revealing meticulously drawn diagrams and notes on the executive's networks. "It is subtle," she said. "Not everyone involved is aware. The traitor has been careful, leaving traces that only someone who watches closely would notice. Patterns emerge if you know where to look." Valerio leaned in, his dark eyes scanning her notes. He could feel the gears in his mind turning, sparked by her observations. "And you think you can uncover who it is?" he asked. "I do," Isla said calmly. "But it will require moving carefully. The wrong step could expose us too early, and the consequences would be severe." Valerio's hand hovered over his glass of water. Normally, he would make decisions with swift authority, relying on his instinct and power. But Isla's insight demanded patience, something he had long thought unnecessary. He realized that her mind was not just different, it was the key to saving everything he had built. "Then we proceed your way," he said finally. "And if you are wrong—" "I will not be," she interrupted softly yet firmly. For hours they pored over the details. Isla traced the flow of money, the chain of communications, and subtle shifts in alliances. She pointed out errors the executives had made, moments where pride had clouded judgment, and gaps in surveillance that only she had noticed. Valerio found himself impressed, not only by her intelligence, but by the courage it took to speak freely in a world dominated by fear and control. "You are unlike anyone I have ever trusted," he admitted quietly, almost reluctantly. "Perhaps because I do not fear the same things," Isla replied, a shadow of a smile on her lips. "I see what must be done, not who will approve it." Their partnership, unconventional as it was, began to take shape. Valerio, usually the master of all moves and calculations, felt a rare thrill in relying on another mind. Isla, who had spent years observing the powerful without interference, found herself stepping into a role she had never imagined: strategist and confidant. As the day wore on, a plan emerged. They would confront the betrayal, secure the money, and expose the hidden adversary within the empire. It was risky, but every step was calculated, every possibility considered. But the world outside was restless. Rival factions had noticed the subtle shifts in Valerio's operations. They did not yet know the full plan, but instinct told them that something was changing. The whispers in the shadows grew louder, and unseen eyes watched Isla's movements with curiosity and suspicion. Valerio sensed it too. His instincts, honed by years of navigating treachery, told him that their success depended not just on strategy but on timing. One wrong move, and the betrayal they sought to expose could become a weapon against them instead. "Are you ready?" he asked as the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the office. Isla nodded. "I have never been more ready." Together, they moved through the headquarters, speaking only in quiet tones. Valerio's presence commanded attention, yet it was Isla's observations that guided them. They noticed a subtle hesitation in one executive's behavior, a misstep in communication that others had ignored. Every detail was a thread, and Isla was weaving them into a pattern no one else could see. Hours passed, and the evening deepened into night. Finally, they confronted the first clue of the betrayal. A series of transactions, carefully hidden, revealed the traitor's hand. The realization was sharp, and Valerio's usual calm flickered with tension. The betrayal was worse than he had imagined. It was not only financial, it was personal. Someone close had chosen self-interest over loyalty, putting the empire at risk for gain. "This is dangerous," he muttered, more to himself than to Isla. "I know," she replied, "but it can be fixed. We just have to move carefully." The tension between them was palpable. For all her intelligence, Isla was still human and the stakes were life-altering. Valerio, for the first time in years, felt a rare vulnerability, not from the threat outside, but from his reliance on another person. He had spent decades trusting only himself, and now he found that he could not succeed without her. As they planned the next move, a quiet understanding developed between them. Their partnership was no longer just strategic, it was built on trust, respect, and a subtle connection neither could fully explain. Every glance, every quiet word carried weight. They were navigating more than just betrayal. They were navigating the fragile beginnings of something neither had expected. But danger was closer than they imagined. Just as they prepared to confront the executive who had betrayed them, a message arrived, a warning that the rival faction had learned of Valerio's plan. They were moving swiftly, intending to strike before he could secure the 200 million. The timing was perilous, the threat immediate. Valerio's jaw tightened. They move too fast, he said. We may not have the luxury of time. Isla's eyes narrowed, but she did not falter. Then we act now. Delay will cost everything. But if we move carefully, we can turn their speed against them. Night fell fully, and the city outside pulsed with life and danger. Together, Valerio and Isla prepared to step into the fray. They were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and yet, for the first time, the Empire had a chance, not because of brute force, but because of insight, courage, and the unexpected alliance between a mafia boss and a wine waitress who saw the world differently. The first confrontation loomed ahead. The traitor awaited, the rival faction waited, and the $200 million hung in a delicate balance. Every choice mattered. Every misstep could be fatal. And yet, in the quiet before the storm, Valerio found himself stealing glances at Isla. Her calm determination, her unspoken strength, and her quiet confidence had begun to stir something he had not felt in years, something beyond respect or curiosity. But there was no time for sentiment. They would have to move now or risk losing everything. The city lights flickered through the tall windows, shadows stretching across the office like fingers of fate. Valerio and Isla exchanged a look, a silent understanding of the peril, the stakes, and the unspoken connection that bound them together in this moment. With a final breath, they stepped into the unknown, the night swallowing their figures as the first move in their daring plan unfolded. The city's night was alive with quiet threats. Streetlights flickered, casting long, wavering shadows across the alleyways below, while the tall towers of glass and steel stood like silent sentinels over the empire of Don Valerio. Every step taken within the walls of his headquarters was a calculated move, a delicate dance with danger that could end in victory or ruin. Valerio and Isla moved through the halls in near silence, their footsteps barely audible over the hum of security systems and the distant murmur of the city. Every second mattered. Every glance could reveal an enemy lurking in the dark. They reached the office of the executive who had betrayed Valerio. The door was slightly ajar, a shadow of light spilling into the corridor. Valerio's hand rested lightly on the handle, but it was Isla's sharp eyes that first noticed the subtle cues. A misplaced folder, the slight tilt of a chair, a faint scent of strong coffee that had been left as a distraction. "This is no ordinary setup," she whispered. "They expected someone, but not us. We must be careful." Valerio's dark eyes scanned the hallway. "You've seen these traps before." "Not exactly," Isla admitted, "but I have learned to read intentions in small things. The pause of a step, the angle of a glance, these are all signals." The two of them moved forward, side by side. Valerio, normally so commanding, relied on Isla's insight to guide him. Every step, every decision was informed by her observations, and he could not help but admire her courage. In her quiet way, she moved like a shadow, precise and aware, fearless in the face of danger. They reached the office and paused just outside the door. Inside, the executive was hunched over a desk, frantically typing into a secure terminal. Papers were scattered across the surface, but Isla noticed the pattern beneath the chaos. "There," she whispered, pointing to a series of files. "He's trying to redirect the funds. If he succeeds, it will vanish into the rival faction's hands." Valerio's jaw tightened. "Then we stop him carefully." Isla nodded. Together they entered the room. Valerio's presence was commanding, and the executive froze, startled. His eyes darted to the terminal, then back at Valerio, realizing too late that his betrayal had been uncovered. "You've made a mistake," Valerio said, his voice calm but filled with authority. "And you underestimated us." The executive tried to reach for a drawer, perhaps a weapon, perhaps a hidden phone. Isla, quick as a shadow herself, stepped forward and blocked him, her eyes cold and unyielding. "It ends here," she said. "No one else needs to be involved." The executive hesitated, then slowly sank into his chair, realizing that his position offered no escape. Valerio watched the scene unfold, a mix of satisfaction and tension coursing through him. They had taken the first step, but the danger was far from over. The rival faction was still out there, waiting for any misstep. "Good," Valerio said quietly. "Now tell me everything." For the next hour, the executive revealed the intricate web of deception. Every detail, every connection was laid bare. Isla recorded notes meticulously, ensuring that nothing was missed. Valerio listened, processing the information, planning the next move. It was precise, careful work, yet the weight of responsibility pressed on them both. One wrong decision and the 200 million and their lives could be lost. But even as they worked, the undercurrent of tension grew. Isla could sense it, the subtle changes in the air, the way shadows seemed to stretch toward them, as if the city itself was aware of the danger. Her instincts were sharp, honed by years of observation, and she knew that their enemies were closer than they realized. Suddenly, the sound of distant footsteps echoed through the hallway. Both of them froze. Valerio signaled Isla to stay silent, and they moved toward the shadows. A figure emerged, a rival agent sent to observe, to test, or perhaps to attack. Isla's heart raced, but her movements were calm, precise. She guided Valerio through the shadows, avoiding detection with a skill that seemed almost instinctive. When the agent passed without noticing them, Valerio exhaled slowly. "Your instincts are remarkable," he said. "I have never relied on anyone like this before." "It's not about relying," Isla replied softly. "It's about seeing clearly." The moment passed, but the tension lingered. Valerio realized something profound. Isla's strength was not just in her mind, but in her courage. She faced danger without fear, without hesitation, and yet she remained fully herself. In a world where power often corrupted, where fear dictated actions, she was a rare force of clarity. As they returned to the office to finalize their plan, Valerio felt a shift within himself. The partnership he had forged with Isla was changing him, drawing out a part of him he had long buried, a capacity for trust, for reliance, for connection. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. They worked late into the night, tracing the flow of the funds, identifying weak points in the rival faction's operations, and preparing for the confrontation that would decide the fate of the empire. Every move was calculated, every detail scrutinized. Yet even as they prepared, Isla could feel the presence of unseen eyes, the knowledge that their enemies were waiting, ready to strike at the first sign of weakness. Finally, they were ready. The plan was set, the steps clear, and the risk calculated. Valerio and Isla exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of the stakes, the danger, and the bond that had formed between them. "You are certain of this?" Valerio asked, his voice low. "As certain as we can be," Isla replied. "But remember, they are expecting mistakes." "We must give them none," Valerio nodded. "Then we move at first light. Tonight the empire will either survive or fall." The hours passed slowly. Outside, the city slept, unaware of the battle unfolding in its shadows. Inside, Valerio and Isla prepared, each aware of the other's strengths, each relying on the unspoken trust that had grown between them. Then, just before dawn, a sudden alarm shattered the quiet. The rival faction had made their move, sending agents to intercept the funds before they could be secured. Valerio's instincts flared, but Isla's calm voice guided him. "Wait for the right moment," she whispered. "We act together." The confrontation was swift and precise. Valerio, moving with authority, directed the security team to block entrances while Isla traced the rival agents' movements, predicting their actions with remarkable accuracy. Every step, every decision, was informed by her observations, and Valerio followed without hesitation. The rival agents faltered, confused by the precision and coordination of their opponents. Valerio and Isla moved like shadows themselves, striking with timing and accuracy that left no room for error. Within minutes, the immediate threat was neutralized, the path to securing the funds clear. Valerio exhaled, a rare smile touching his lips. "You have done what no one else could," he said quietly. "You've saved the Empire." Isla shook her head. "We've only begun. The threat is still out there. We cannot let our guard down." He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the calm determination in her eyes. In that moment, he realized something profound. This was more than strategy, more than intellect. It was courage, insight, and the rare ability to face danger without losing oneself. And then, without warning, a new message arrived. A note slipped under the office door, simple, chilling. "You are not the only ones watching. Your next move will decide everything." Valerio's dark eyes met Isla's. The silent understanding passed between them. The real battle was just beginning. The Empire had survived the first strike, but the enemy was patient, cunning, and relentless. For the first time, Valerio felt the weight of uncertainty, not about the Empire but about the world beyond it. And for the first time, he realized he could not face it alone. Isla, standing beside him, felt the same awareness. The connection between them, forged in danger and trust, had become unbreakable. Together, they would face whatever came next, relying on wit, courage, and the bond that neither could fully explain. The city outside continued to hum, unaware of the storm that had passed and the one that was yet to come. Shadows lingered in the corners, secrets whispered through the alleyways, and the empire of Don Valerio remained on the edge of a knife. And in the eye of that storm, a wine waitress and a mafia boss had begun a dance with shadows that would change everything, if they survived. The night had grown thick over the city, folding the streets in shadows that seemed almost alive. Every alleyway whispered threats, and the neon lights above flickered like distant stars warning of unseen dangers. Inside his headquarters, Don Valerio stood at the edge of a balcony, staring down at the world below. The storm of the past days had left its mark on him, not just the near loss of $200 million, but the realization that his empire had vulnerabilities he could no longer ignore. Isla approached quietly, her steps measured. She did not startle him, and yet her presence brought a new energy, a calm that was both grounding and invigorating. He turned, his dark eyes meeting hers, and for the first time in weeks he allowed himself to simply breathe. "You think it is over?" he asked quietly. Isla shook her head. "No, this is only the beginning. The rival faction has been patient. They will strike when we are least prepared." Valerio's jaw tightened. "Then we strike first." "Carefully," she said, her voice soft but firm. "We cannot rush. One wrong move and everything we have rebuilt could collapse." The weight of her words settled over him. In the past, he had relied on power, fear, and force. Now he realized survival demanded something more: strategy, patience, and trust in another's insight. Isla had become more than a partner in this operation. She was the key to navigating the danger, a mind as sharp as his own, but tempered with foresight he sometimes lacked. They moved through the corridors of the headquarters together, reviewing plans, updating strategies, and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Valerio's usual commanding presence was still there, but it was tempered by respect and reliance on Isla's observations. He noticed subtle shifts in her posture, slight gestures that revealed her thinking before she spoke. "You have changed the way I operate," he admitted quietly as they examined the maps of their next move. "I have only shown you what was always visible," Isla replied. "You just needed someone to point it out." The bond between them was becoming undeniable. It was not spoken, but in every glance and careful word, there was a tension that neither could ignore. They were allies in a dangerous game, yet the closeness that developed between them added weight to every decision, every action. The first step of their countermove was to secure the critical funds and uncover any remaining traitors within the syndicate. They knew the rival faction was waiting, that the slightest misstep could trigger chaos. Every choice had to be calculated, every movement deliberate. As they approached the inner vaults of the headquarters, Isla noticed something that had escaped their earlier planning. A subtle pattern in the security cameras, a timing discrepancy that suggested someone had been manipulating the system from within. "They've prepared traps," she said, pointing to the monitors. "Not for us, but for someone who follows routine. If we move differently, we can bypass them entirely." Valerio nodded. "Then we move together. No hesitation, no fear." They advanced through the vault corridors, moving like shadows themselves. Isla's careful instructions guided Valerio, allowing them to avoid the hidden dangers the rival faction had placed. Every step was precise, every decision informed by her insight. For the first time, Valerio felt a rare combination of admiration and trust that he had never extended to anyone in his life. Suddenly, a sound echoed from the far end of the corridor, a soft click, almost imperceptible. Valerio froze, instinct taking over, but Isla remained calm. She leaned close to him and whispered, "It's a trigger for a security protocol. We can bypass it if we act now." With careful coordination, they moved past the trap, reaching the vault without alerting anyone. The 200 million was within reach, but their victory was not complete. They still had to secure it and expose the hidden adversaries within the syndicate. Inside the vault, Isla worked quickly, verifying the transfer routes and confirming the integrity of the funds. Valerio watched her, impressed by the precision and clarity with which she moved. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. Every action was confident, controlled, and effective. "You have saved more than money," Valerio said quietly. "You've saved the empire itself." Isla looked up, her eyes meeting his. "We've saved it together, but the threat isn't gone. Someone inside still has plans that could undo everything." Valerio nodded. "Then we find them." The next hours were a tense mixture of strategy and action. They traced the movements of every suspect, cross-referenced communications, and laid careful traps of their own to expose the remaining traitors. Isla's mind was a constant guide, seeing connections and patterns that Valerio might have missed. Her ability to anticipate danger, combined with his authority and presence, created a force neither could have achieved alone. Finally, their efforts bore fruit. The last traitor was identified, a trusted lieutenant who had hoped to profit from the rival faction's schemes. Confronted with evidence, he had no choice but to surrender. Valerio's authority was undeniable, yet it was Isla's insight that had revealed the truth. "This changes everything," Valerio said as they secured the lieutenant. "The empire is whole again, but it has been shaken. Trust is fragile and we must rebuild it carefully." Isla nodded. "And the rival faction? They will retreat for now," Valerio replied. "But they are patient. They will test us again sooner or later. That is inevitable." For a moment, silence filled the room. Both understood the danger that still lingered, the fragile balance that had been restored, and the deep bond that had formed between them through shared trials. Valerio's gaze lingered on Isla. Her courage, intelligence, and calm in the face of danger had changed him. He had spent years commanding fear and respect, but now he realized that trust and understanding were just as powerful. "You've taught me something I thought I'd forgotten," he said softly, "that even in shadows one can find light." Isla's eyes held a subtle warmth. "And even in power one can find someone worth trusting." There was a pause, a quiet moment amidst the chaos, where two people, bound by danger and respect, allowed themselves a fleeting connection. It was unspoken, but it was there, a bond forged in risk, intelligence, and courage. But the world outside did not pause. As they prepared to leave the vault, a message arrived, simple, chilling, and direct. "The game has only begun. One move wrong and all is lost." Valerio's jaw tightened. The rival faction was patient, cunning, and relentless. Every victory had only drawn their attention, and the next move would be critical. He looked at Isla, seeing the resolve in her eyes. "Are you ready?" he asked. "As ready as I will ever be," she replied. The pair moved through the headquarters with purpose. Security had been heightened, but Isla's keen eye and strategic mind guided them flawlessly. Every step was deliberate, every action precise, and every shadow was watched. Finally, they reached the upper floors, where Valerio often met with allies and strategists. Here, they would consolidate their position, prepare for the next confrontation, and plan the defense against the rival faction. Yet even in this moment of apparent calm, Isla could feel it, a subtle tension in the air, the faint pressure of unseen eyes watching them. The threat was not gone. The city, the empire, and their lives remained entangled in a web of power and danger that would not be easily unraveled. Valerio noticed her unease. "What is it?" he asked. "They are still out there," she said quietly, "waiting, watching, patient. They know we are capable and they will test us again, soon." Valerio's dark eyes softened. "Then we will be ready together." And in that moment, for the first time, Isla believed it. They were no longer merely a mafia boss and a waitress. They were partners, allies, and something more. Two minds, two hearts, two forces united against a world that sought to destroy them. And as they looked out over the city from the safety of their headquarters, they both knew the storm was far from over. But for now they had survived. For now the empire remained intact. And for now the bond between them had grown stronger than any fear, any threat, or any shadow that dared to rise against them. The city was quiet at first light, but the calm was deceptive. Beneath the surface, the rival faction stirred, preparing for a final test of skill, courage, and strategy. The night's shadows had left whispers of danger in every alley, every tower, every hidden corridor. And within the headquarters of Don Valerio, anticipation hung heavy in the air. Valerio stood by the large window of his office, watching the city awaken. His mind was sharp, honed by the trials of the past days, yet the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. He was no longer just a mafia boss defending his empire. He was a man who had learned the value of trust, insight, and loyalty, lessons imparted by an unexpected ally. Isla appeared behind him, her steps quiet yet purposeful. The calm in her presence contrasted the tension of the morning. Valerio turned, meeting her gaze, and in that moment the world outside seemed to fade. There was trust, mutual respect, and a bond formed in the crucible of danger, a bond stronger than any contract, stronger than fear itself. "We've prepared as much as we can," Valerio said softly. "Now we wait for their move." Isla nodded. "Patience. They will act, but we control what they do not see." The hours passed in careful readiness. Security teams were briefed, plans rehearsed, and contingencies considered. Yet the real power lay in the partnership between Valerio and Isla, the silent understanding that guided every step, every decision. They had learned to anticipate danger, to read intentions, and to act decisively together. Finally, the moment arrived. The rival faction's agents moved into the city, their approach subtle, calculated, yet unaware that the pair they intended to challenge had already anticipated their moves. Isla's keen eyes spotted patterns in their approach, while Valerio's authority commanded the resources and personnel needed to counter them. The confrontation was not a battle of brute force, but of strategy, wit, and timing. Every agent's movement was predicted, every action countered with precision. Isla guided Valerio through the chaos, her calm confidence turning potential danger into opportunity. Together, they moved like shadows, quick, fluid, and unstoppable. At one point, a team of rival strategists attempted a diversion, hoping to split their attention. Valerio froze, instinct urging him to act, but Isla's voice guided him. "Wait, follow the pattern," she whispered. "They will reveal themselves in their overconfidence." And they did. The moment the agents made their error, Valerio struck, his authority and presence commanding obedience from his own team, while Isla orchestrated the capture with intelligence and precision. Within minutes, the rival faction was exposed, cornered, and powerless. Valerio exhaled, a rare smile appearing on his face. "We did it," he said quietly, though the relief was tempered by the knowledge that vigilance was eternal. Isla smiled back, though her eyes remained focused. "This is victory for now. But the Empire's true strength lies in what we build next." Together, they consolidated their position, securing the 200 million and ensuring the loyalty of all factions within the syndicate. The traitors had been exposed, the rivals repelled, and the Empire, fragile though it had been, stood stronger than before. But beyond the triumph, a subtler, deeper victory had been achieved. Valerio had learned to trust, to rely on insight over intimidation, to respect courage that did not rely on fear. And Isla had discovered the power she wielded, not just through observation and intelligence, but through the ability to inspire loyalty, respect, and change even in the most hardened of hearts. As the city lights flickered through the tall windows, Valerio turned to Isla. "You've done more than save the Empire," he said. "You've changed it and me." Her eyes met his, calm yet intense. "We've done it together, and that is what matters." For a moment they simply stood, the weight of the past days lifting, leaving space for acknowledgement, for understanding, and for the quiet recognition of what they had become to each other. "You've taught me something," Valerio said softly, "that I thought I'd lost. That power is nothing without trust, and strength is nothing without courage." Isla's lips curved in a subtle smile. "And you've reminded me that even ordinary people, if brave and wise, can shape extraordinary outcomes." Their connection, forged through danger and mutual respect, was now undeniable. Neither needed to speak it aloud. The bond between them was clear in every glance, every shared thought, every moment of coordination that had saved an empire. The city below seemed to shimmer with the promise of new beginnings. Valerio and Isla had faced shadows and emerged stronger, not just in position, but in understanding of themselves and each other. The empire was secure, but more importantly, the human connection that had been forged in its defense was resilient, enduring, and powerful. "Now," Valerio said, his voice steady, "we rebuild, stronger, smarter, together." Isla nodded, and carefully. "The world will always test us, but with each challenge we grow." Together they walked through the halls of the headquarters, their steps confident, their presence commanding respect. Staff, once wary of the unusual alliance, now recognized the strength and wisdom in it. The empire had survived because they had faced it not just with power, but with intellect, courage, and unity. And yet, as they looked toward the future, the city continued its pulse of life, indifferent yet full of potential. Shadows lingered, as they always would, but Valerio and Isla knew that they had the skill, the trust, and the bond to meet whatever came. The night had tested them, danger had challenged them, and together they had prevailed. As they paused to look out over the city, Isla placed a hand lightly on Valerio's arm. "Whatever comes next," she said, "we face it together." Valerio met her gaze, seeing not just the intelligence and courage, but the trust and loyalty that had become as vital as the empire itself. Together, he confirmed. The sunrise painted the towers in gold and crimson, a symbolic promise of new beginnings. The storm had passed, the empire had endured, and 2 lives had been irrevocably changed. The wine waitress who had seen the world clearly, and the mafia boss who had learned to trust, had formed an alliance stronger than fear, stronger than wealth, stronger than the shadows that had once threatened to consume them. In the quiet aftermath, the city seemed almost to acknowledge their triumph. Neon lights softened, the streets below moved with ordinary rhythm, and the danger that had stalked them receded, though it would never fully disappear. Valerio and Isla had become legends in their own right, not merely for their victory over rival factions or the recovery of immense wealth, but for the bond they had forged, the courage they had displayed, and the wisdom they had shared. The empire would continue to thrive, but the story of its survival, and of the unlikely partnership that had saved it, would become mythic, whispered through the city's streets and towers for years to come. And in that moment, the empire was not just an empire. It was a symbol of courage, trust, and the extraordinary power of insight when combined with strength. Valerio had learned to value connection over domination, and Isla had learned that even ordinary people could shape destinies. Together they stood as the rulers of a world built on shadows and light, strategy and courage, fear and respect. And as the city's heartbeat continued below, there was an unspoken understanding. No threat, no challenge, and no shadow could undo what they had built together. The story was complete, but their journey, like all true legends, was only just beginning.